First, I would like to mention MAYU Water. If you're trying to upgrade your hydration, MAYU uses a vortex flow system that mimics how water naturally moves in rivers and streams. That motion helps increase oxygenation and release unwanted gases like chlorine, improving overall water quality and making it easier to stay consistently hydrated. But here's what most people overlook. Hydration isn't just about water. It's about minerals and absorption. MAYU allows you to remineralize your water with essential minerals and electrolytes, supporting cellular hydration, energy levels, and overall physiological balance. When your water has the right structure and mineral content, your body can actually use it more efficiently. If you care about hydration, performance, or just feeling better day to day, this is one of those simple upgrades that adds up. You can get 10% off with the code AUTISM. Next, Daylight Computer Company and Daylight Kids. These devices are designed to work with your brain, not against it. And honestly, the future of tech is already here. Most screens are built for stimulation, bright, fast, and attention-grabbing. But that often leads to eye strain, mental fatigue, and disrupted sleep. Daylight takes a different approach. By reducing blue light and lowering overall sensory load, these devices support sustained focus, calmer attention, and healthier sleep patterns. For anyone who feels drained after screen time, or for kids whose nervous systems are still developing, this creates a much more natural, regulated way to engage with technology. If you want your tech to support your brain instead of overstimulating it, this is worth checking out. Use code AUTISM for $50 off. And finally, Chroma light devices, lights designed for humans. Natural light contains a full spectrum that our brains and bodies are tuned to. But most modern indoor lighting falls short of that. It's often narrow, harsh, and out of sync with how we're designed to experience light. Chroma is built to bring that balance back. These lights are designed to better reflect the qualities of natural light, supporting your circadian rhythm, reducing sensory strain, and creating environments that feel calmer and more aligned. That can translate into better sleep, more stable energy, and a nervous system that isn't constantly being pushed toward overload. If you have ever felt off under certain lighting and didn't know why, this is worth exploring. Get 10% off with the code AUTISM. If you're optimizing your environment, your focus, your well-being, your nervous system, these products are worth checking out. We will continue the Autism and the Structure of Reality series. This is part 4. The Illusion. Why social reality feels real, even when it isn't. In the last episode, we went beneath the self, beneath the crowd, and into the mind itself. Part 3 went into the reality is not something we simply perceive. It is something we construct through filtering, through attention, through prediction, through salience, and through compression. And that led to a conclusion. Different processing does not just lead to different perspectives. It leads to a different experienced reality. Not metaphorically, but literally. And that creates a problem. Humans have an infinite capacity to think, infinite good to infinite bad. Thinking is human creation. Your thoughts will own you. Do you construct your thoughts? Or does the collective, the herd, or the social norms? Thoughts do not know you, and you do not owe your thoughts anything. Often your temptations will be the generation of those thoughts. you will be led by something. Because we still live in what feels like a shared world. We talk to each other. We agree on things, and we build systems together. So the question becomes, if reality is constructed individually, then what is this shared reality we all seem to live in? And more importantly, why does it feel so real, even when it isn't fully accurate? A shared reality can feel completely stable, even when it is built on selective omission. And this is where something important emerges, because if shared reality depends on people compressing, filtering, and prioritizing in similar ways, then anyone who does not do that in the same way will not just experience the world differently, they will stand slightly outside of that shared construction, and not by choice, but by structure. And perhaps the deeper illusion is this: most people experience their version of reality as reality itself. So reality feels objective, but isn't. Remember the central theme of phenomenology. Humans have a subjective self-perception in a subjective perceptual world. So good luck with that. That reality is simply out there, and we all perceive the same thing. Differences are treated as opinion, interpretation, or error. But based on the message in part 3, that assumption does not hold. Because what you experience depends on what gets filtered, what gets attended to, what gets predicted, and gets marked as important. We can only see what we allow ourselves to see, or we can only see what we are allowed to see. One is a limitation from the self, one from the herd. And when enough people share similar filtering, similar attention, patterns, similar predictions, and similar salience, their experiences begin to overlap. Not completely, but enough to feel the same. So the same world is never actually the same. And yet, it feels like it is. So why is that? Because there is enough overlap for agreement to emerge. And that agreement creates the illusion of objectivity. Social reality is not discovered. It is stabilized through shared agreement. Shared reality is not proof that something is true. It is proof that enough people are simplifying it in the same way. Humans have a reliable way of receiving an answer and thinking, that must be it, or worse, that is it. It is the easy way. Otherwise, we risk friction, internal friction. And we will bail on that discomfort, even when so slight. We love to have our own beliefs confirmed, and we will manipulate answers to do so, and or quickly reject answers that do not fit. And this has direct implications. If someone's processing, let's say someone with autism, retains more detail, prioritizes different signals, or resists simplification, then they are not just seeing things differently, they are operating with a different version of what feels real. And Jung warned about something closely related in the undiscovered self. Jung says, people are largely unconscious of the fact that their opinions and emotions are largely conditioned by their surroundings. The great illusion is not shared reality itself, but the belief that we are consciously aware of how it is constructed. What feels like shared objective world is often just enough people compressing reality in the same way. The crowd as a reality stabilizing system. Nietzsche described the herd as a system that preserves itself. It enforces norms, values, and expectations. But there is a deeper function here. The herd does not just regulate behavior, it stabilizes reality itself. Because for a group to function, people have to interpret signals the same, respond in predictable ways, and agree on what matters. Without that, coordination breaks down. So the system does not just push people to behave the same, it pushes them to perceive the same, to compress in the same ways, to ignore the same details, to prioritize the same signals. And over time, that creates something powerful, a shared, stable version of reality. But here is the critical part. That stability is not based on perfect accuracy. It is based on functional agreement. The crowd does not just enforce behavior, it enforces a shared version of reality. But more specifically, it stabilizes what counts as valid perception in the first place. What is taken seriously? What is ignored? What is treated as real? The herd does not just resist difference. It stabilizes a version of reality where difference becomes invisible or invalid. Nietzsche wrote, "Madness is rare in individuals, but in groups, parties, nations, and ages, it is the rule." And that line becomes much deeper once you understand collective compression. Because groups can stabilize distortions so effectively that they stop feeling distorted at all. And this is where autistic experience often collides with the system. Because when perception, attention, or salience are organized differently, the individual is not just outside the norm behaviorally. They are misaligned with the shared model of reality itself. Jung's self, when it remains central, refuses to let the persona perform that compression at the cost of internal truth. Kierkegaard's solitary self cannot disappear into the crowd without violence to its own structure. And Dostoevsky's underground man sees the cracks in the crystal palace that the herd's shared model refuses to acknowledge. And Jung warned directly, the bigger the crowd, the more negligible the individual becomes. The crowd does not merely demand conformity, it demands a shared construction of what counts as real. And compression creates agreement. So go back to part 3. Most systems rely on compression. I know that is repeated, and the Autism and Intuition episode outlines this, but this is worth repeating because this is a major region of interest for limitation. They reduce complexity, detail, and variation so that the interaction can happen quickly. Now extend that. If multiple people compress in similar ways, they end up with similar outputs, even if the original input was far more complex. And that similarity creates agreement. Agreement is not necessarily full understanding or shared depth. It is shared simplification. Agreement requires compression, but compression alone is not enough. Agreement also depends on shared salience, what gets flagged as important, and shared prediction, what is expected before it even appears. When those align, agreement feels natural. When they don't, even clear perception can feel out of place. If a system depends on shared compression, then anything that resists that compression will not just look different, it will look incorrect. And this is one of the core tensions. Because when someone retains more detail or resists simplifying what they perceive, they are not just slower or more precise. They are less compatible with the compressed model that allows agreement to happen quickly. What we call agreement is often just collective compression wearing the mask of truth. This illusion of common sense, once this shared compression stabilizes, it starts to feel like the truth. It becomes what people call common sense. But common sense is not universal. It is local. It is what emerges when a group shares similar processing shortcuts, similar assumptions, and similar filters. And because those shortcuts are rarely examined, they feel self-evident. What feels obvious is often just what is commonly compressed. What we call normal is often just what is commonly simplified. And over time, that simplification becomes invisible. Not because it disappears, but because it is no longer questioned. So when someone does not compress the same way, notices different details, or questions assumptions, it does not just feel like disagreement, it feels like something is off. Because they are not operating within the same compressed model. And this is often where autistic individuals are misunderstood. Not because they lack understanding, but because they are not relying on the same shortcuts that makes things feel obvious to everyone else. Kierkegaard captured something profound here. People demand freedom of speech as a compensation for the freedom of thought, which they seldom use. Because genuine thought destabilizes simplification, slows compression down. It forces people to examine assumptions they inherited automatically. Common sense is not common truth. It is common compression. When differences expose this so-called illusion, so bring in the individual. When someone processes differently, retains more detail, prioritizes different signals, questions compressed assumptions, they do not just behave differently. They destabilize the illusion because they reveal what was ignored, what was simplified, what was assumed. Kierkegaard warned that the crowd provides safety because it removes the burden of individual truth. But we are all unique organisms, or not. Are we? Are we all unique or not? When you align with the crowd, you do not have to question. You do not have to examine. You do not have to stand alone. And this provides comfort, ease, and certainty. But when someone does not align, they reintroduce uncertainty. And I can promise you, you don't like uncertainty. See the whiteboard episodes on the internal calculators and how we constructed beliefs, phenotypes, and personalities. That uncertainty is not just intellectual, it is existential. Because if the shared model is questioned, then the stability people rely on begins to weaken. And that uncertainty feels like a threat. The problem with difference is not always that it is wrong. It is differences disrupts what everyone else agrees not to question. The illusion holds together not because it is correct, but because it is collectively protected. And this helps explain something important: why difference is often corrected first, instead of being understood. And perhaps Dostoevsky said it best in Notes from the Underground. What can be expected of man since he is being endowed with strange qualities? Because human beings are not naturally simple. Reality is not naturally simple. This simplification comes afterward. Differences does not threaten reality. It threatens the agreement that reality is simple. So why does the illusion not break more often? Because it works. Shared reality allows coordination, communication, and efficiency. It reduces ambiguity, conflict, and processing load. So even if it is incomplete, it is functional. So even if it is false, it doesn't matter. And systems prioritize function over accuracy. Dostoevsky's Crystal Palace captures this perfectly. A perfectly rational, predictable world. Efficient and stable, but built on simplification. And his characters resist it, not because they want chaos, but because they see what has been removed to make it work. You sacrifice yourself. And for what? The illusion persists, not because it is perfect, but because it is efficient. And this is why the system does not easily adapt. Because the shared model works well enough for most people, which means those who do not fit are more likely to be pushed toward it than the system is to expand around them. Can you fit in or not? Are you like the so-called normal people or not? The Crystal Palace stands not because it is true, but because it is convenient. And there is a cost of shared reality. Shared reality requires compression, agreement, and alignment. But that comes with a cost. It limits detail, the variation, and alternative structures. The cost of shared reality is not just lost detail. It is the systematic exclusion of anything that does not compress the same way. So the more stable the shared reality becomes, the less space there is for difference. And when difference appears, it is often corrected, dismissed, misunderstood. Not because it has no value, but because it does not fit the shared model. The more stable a system becomes, the less tolerance it has for what it does not already include. And this is the deeper implication. The issue is not simply that some people are different. It is that the structure of shared reality is not built to easily include that difference. If shared reality is built on agreement, then anything outside that agreement is not just misunderstood, it is structurally excluded from being recognized as real. Stability always has a price, and the price is paid by whoever cannot compress into the agreed upon version of reality. Across these last 4 episodes, we have built something layered and coherent. Jung showed us the structure of the self. Nietzsche and Kierkegaard, and Dostoevsky as well, revealed the timeless tension between the self and the crowd. Jung comes after, by the way. Jung came after those three and helps provide the how to improve. Neuroscience and the Whiteboard series episodes on internal calculators, building our phenotype, personality, and beliefs, showed us how the mind constructs reality through perception, attention, prediction, salience, and compression. Remember, we are not reacting to the world around us. We are reacting to the predictions we have about the world around us. And now we see how that constructed reality becomes stabilized into a shared illusion that feels more solid than truth itself. Shared reality is not a fixed truth. It is an agreement maintained through compression, alignment, and repetition. And like any agreement, it holds not because it captures everything, but because enough people accept what it leaves out. So the question shifts again. Not, why doesn't this person see what everyone else sees? But, what is everyone else not seeing because they are seeing it the same way? Because sometimes what looks like misunderstanding is actually a different relationship, reality itself. The world feels stable, not because it is fully understood, but because enough people agree on a simplified version of it. And that difference, the one that refuses easy compression, is what keeps the possibility of deeper truth alive. If you're listening to the podcast, listening to the episode, please feel free to leave a review or rating. In podcasting, reviews, ratings, and downloads are huge, and I very much appreciate your feedback. You can contact me on X at RPS47586. You can email me info.fromthespectrum@gmail.com. You can check out the YouTube page for full-length videos, shorts, and clips. Feel free to contact me anytime to have discussions about this stuff. Thank you for listening to From the Spectrum podcast.